Hello, this is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Hey, we're so excited you decided to stop by. Hey, you can catch us every Wednesday evening, 8:30 Central Standard Time or 9:30 Eastern Time. We want to see you right here at Positive Power Christian Radio. Again, this is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades and Justice podcast, a chance where you can hear about justice and injustices here in our country. Again, Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Hello and welcome to Shades in Justice podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Evelyn Hill, and you can always catch me at www.drevelynhill.net. Hey, do we have a fantastic show for you today? We are blessed to have with us the one and only Dr. Kristin Feeback, all the way from Spring Hill, Kansas. Is that correct? All right,
You
Doc,
got it.
if you don't mind, would you just first of all, I just want to say welcome to you, and we're glad
Thank you.
you are with us on this evening.
Thank you. Honor to be here.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to start off with allowing you an opportunity to share a little bit about your career path. And I have met you through my son, John Hudson, who is with Reasons to Believe organization. And part of what he does is work with students in areas of mental wellness and suicide prevention. And when he met you, it's like he got angel wings. He just, Mom, you got to meet her. She's wonderful. And she's all about suicide prevention. So tonight, we will be talking about suicide prevention. But before we go there, let's hear a little bit about you and your professional career. What got you to the 988 Suicide Prevention Hotline?
Sure. Well, once again, we have the same passion, your son, because he does a lot in the community, and he does a lot for youth, and we both have that same passion. So I can definitely agree and relate there. And thanks again, everybody, for having me. So just a little bit about myself. I work for a company it's a non-for-profit called ComCare. I've been with ComCare for a little over 2 years now. ComCare has basically 6 lines of business, but our biggest line of business that we serve the community the most in and touch quite a few members of the community is through our 988 suicide crisis hotline number. And I know as we kind of move through the cast, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But prior to that, I've worked in mental health, behavioral health for the last 25 years. I've kind of in the last 20 years been more in the leadership role. So I support directors. I think that's really, really important that they have what they need to serve the population and the community in which they're serving. So prior to that, I worked at a state hospital. I ran that for a while. And then prior to that, I worked in long-term care. So just a really thick career of really wanting to impact a lot of people and making sure their mental health needs are met. And when you've worked in the state hospital system and in whatever state you've been in, that's kind of the last phase. I mean, when you get into involuntary care and stuff like that. And so what really appealed me to this current position that I'm in and the 988 Suicide Crisis Hotline is the prevention piece of it. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so I've been with 988 for quite a while now, and it's amazing how much it's being utilized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is excellent. And we'll get back to that, and maybe you have some numbers, some statistics you'd like to share, because maybe, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too, maybe there was an increase during and even after COVID-19, after the country was shut down. But we'll get to that in just a little bit.
Sure.
Now, how did you hear about this organization that you work for, Calm Care? Is that correct?
Yes.
How did
Yes.
you find out about it? And what got you so hyped up about suicide prevention and that
Sure.
programming piece?
Yeah. So I heard about ComCare basically when I started looking for a position. Um, and so I learned about all the different lines of business it served, but also prior, when I first started at ComCare, they had the NSPL, the National Suicide Hotline number.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
when I first started at ComCare, the company itself was bracing for this new 3-digit 988 number.
mhm.
And so that's when I really became knowledgeable and learned a lot about what was getting ready to happen in July, on July 16th of 2022. And that's when the number first came live.
Oh, okay.
Right. So prior to that,
Fantastic.
yeah. So prior to that, and even currently, we still facilitate the crisis hotline that meets the needs
Hmm.
in the 22 counties that we serve. So that
Hmm.
1-800 number is still just as active, but 988 is the nationwide number. And
Okay.
so anyway, so that's how I heard about it, and then starting at ComCare, how 988 hadn't fully been initiated yet. So just getting ready for that and making sure we had enough
Ah,
staff to answer the phone and all that was really a big part when I first started. Um, I heard about suicide prevention, coming from a family that my mother had 2 attempts when I was a teen, once at 15 and 17. That was kind of my first experience, a personal experience. Um, and back then, which was many years ago, I really wasn't aware of a number I could call. I know that I
hmm,
needed some help to be able to help her. Um,
hmm.
but when I started kind of telling my story and when I got into college and knew that I wanted to go in the behavioral health field, I would say that's when it became really apparent to me that there are numbers out there and there are
Hmm.
people that I can talk to or that I
Hmm.
even could have talked to at that time. I was just really unaware of the resources.
I
So,
see.
yeah,
And as a teen, you kind of had to take the adult role in uh, thinking of ways how to help your mom, and so that had to be difficult. And the whole thing of your mom having these attempts when you were a teenager left you feeling some kind of way, I'm sure.
sure.
Do you mind sharing any of that, how you felt as a teen? Because maybe there are individuals that's listening to our show that need to know how the other person feels, how uh, the ones that are left may have to be um, dealing with some of this trauma that they incur due to the pain that the actual person is going through.
Sure. Sure.
Hmm.
I can definitely speak to that. Now, one thing about my personal situation with my mother was my mom had substance abuse. She
Okay.
was an alcoholic, and she
Hmm.
was from the time I was about 7 until she's no longer with us. But
Hmm.
um, so so for me, as a teen, in my mind frame, the 2 suicide attempts that she had, she did have to. Somebody came to pick her up.
Hmm.
What EMS came to pick her up and had to revive her and stuff. And then after the one when I was 17, I know she had to stay in the hospital for a little bit.
Hmm.
I don't know if at that point in time, I still think there was a lot of stigma at that point.
Hmm.
I don't remember per se anybody really reaching out to me, like any medical person or anybody with EMS, like providing me with a social worker or somebody just to kind of um, say, hey, this is a big deal. This just happened. And, is there any resources or anything? Um,
Right.
so I just kind of remember really feeling alone, to be honest with you, Dr. Hill.
Hmm.
Um, I know that my school knew some things were going on. I don't think they knew the extent of it. And I was very
Uh-huh.
guarded with who I would talk to about certain things because I also had a
Okay.
younger sister that was
Hmm.
quite a bit younger than me. And I wanted to kind of protect her and didn't want to be taken out of my home or anything like that because it
Right.
probably,
Right.
the situation would have deemed itself, I probably should have been. But I was just very guarded with the information and the situation that I was going through.
Hmm. And
So,
that's to be expected.
sure.
Being the older sibling and having that responsibility. Were
Mhm.
there aunts or your dad or any other adults close by that you trusted in that you could talk to?
At that time, no, my parents were both only children. My mom's mother lived around the area. Didn't really have a mindset that would have been where I could approach her and talk about that.
Okay.
I would say probably my friend's parents kind of knew what was going on a little bit, but again, I was very guarded. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
And see, this is good, very good information. Let me tell you why, Dr. Feedback, and I'm kind of like preaching to the choir here.
Oh, please.
So often, youth that are experiencing their dad or friend or their mom or relative going through these types of issues, they are very guarded and they
Mhm.
don't share with others, and others don't share with them resources or anything, numbers or help for counseling. And just think, even if someone had to ask you, would you like someone to talk to? You may have turned them
Mhm.
down. You might have said, "Oh no, I'm okay. I'm good," because you were guarded. So I could
Right.
see that for me also. I mean, I could see me trying to protect my other sisters most of the time. They got on
Sure.
my last nerve, but I definitely would have, in those types of circumstances, definitely would have tried to protect them and their emotions. And so tell us about that experience and how that drew you into the work that you do now.
Sure. Well, when you go through an experience, really no matter what kind of trauma, what really helps people and what kind of helped me is the sense of having hope. And so what
Ah,
was really neat is as I got older and was trying to figure out how to navigate some of those familial issues, um,
mm-hmm,
I seem to kind of have all the right people at all the right time come across my path.
uh-huh,
And so what I found was is I realized that okay, my situation, um, if I didn't look at my situation as it always being that way and more of a temporary situation, that kind of helped pull
mm-hmm,
me through. And I realized
mm-hmm,
the power of choice and decisions I had of how I wanted my life to be different.
uh-huh, mm-hmm,
But a lot of that was through support of, as I got older and into college, just meeting people and talking with people.
mm-hmm,
I actually ended up going into counseling. Um, I went to a counselor myself in college for a year or so, just kind of worked through
okay,
some of those things. So,
yes,
so I would say what attracted me to the mental health field was I decided that I really wanted to be in a position that I could impact people and give them hope. And
mm-hmm,
sometimes when we get in really challenging situations, whether it's something we're going through or somebody we know is in the having mental health issues or whatever, I think I definitely think hope is the answer. And
mm-hmm,
and the feeling of helplessness,
mm-hmm,
that can then kind of develop into even some feelings of depression because you feel
mm-hmm,
hopeless and
mm-hmm,
helpless about your situation and all that. So I would say that's really what steered me in the direction. And then when I received counseling and saw how much insight I gained from that
Mm-hmm.
and how healthy that was for my
Mm-hmm.
soul and my just my whole mental health in general, that's when I
Mm-hmm.
decided that's what I wanted to do. So,
Wow, that's
yeah,
amazing. I love the word hope. And it
yes.
was after you went to college. So during
Hmm.
those teen years,
Hmm.
um, you lived life with that experience. But then when you go to college, you're around other people, you get to hear other voices,
Hmm.
and you acquire hope that there will be a better day, that this is not going to last always. You know, hope can go a long ways. And like I tell people, hope tries to slip out the back door. So you got to be careful, keep that back door locked so that
Yes,
hope does not slip away,
that's
because it
right.
definitely wants to from time to time. So just the very fact that you are able to grab hold to hope and
Hmm.
not let it go, and to allow that and the your energy to be focused on how can you help others, has brought you into the space that you're in today. So that's
For sure.
pretty incredible. That's remarkable. So tell us about some of the stats you were saying earlier. Um, there may have been, an increase in
Sure.
the national 988 suicide number, and maybe even locally or
Yeah.
statewide.
Well, let me tell you just a little bit about that before I get into the stats. So 988, we kind of did a soft rollout, and most states did when it first came out. So
Uh-huh.
it wasn't really highly advertised
Okay.
because what the call centers, which is ComCare, runs one of the biggest call centers in Missouri. What the state recognized is if we just all of a sudden do a whole bunch of advertising and stuff about it, we don't know what that's going to do to the call centers and their staffing. So
Oh,
they
that's
kind
right.
of did, yeah, they just kind of did a
Mm-hmm.
soft rollout. So we got to
Uh-huh.
see as people were calling the number, and we got to see how many people were calling the number, how we needed to staff up certain shifts because we
Mm-hmm.
have 3 shifts that we staff for. And so that soft rollout was nice because then we really got to gear up and make sure we had
Uh-huh.
adequate staffing. So basically it's been varying on each month how many calls we get, but we notice a steady increase every month. And the
Mm.
other thing I always want to plug in here, Dr. Hill, is you not only can call 988, but you can also text it and you can chat. And
Oh.
because and the reason for that is for people to have the accessibility and the
Mm-hmm.
comfort level of what feels
Mm-hmm.
good to them. Because some people
Mm-hmm.
don't maybe not want to call it, or it's may not be a safe environment to call it because they don't want other people to hear them calling it. So instead they might just be using their
Mm-hmm.
phones to text it. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And
So
so, for instance, say, Dr. Feedback, say I was an individual who was really having a tough night and I was just wanting to end it all.
mhm.
And so I can call that 988 number,
Yes.
um, if I wanted to, but I'm scared to death someone would pick up the phone, which is usually not the case, by the way. Most numbers you call, they don't pick up the phone. But this 988 number, they will pick up the phone. But say I text and they ask me, do you want to speak to somebody? And I'm in such desperate shape, I say yes.
Mhm.
And then the person calls me.
Mhm.
Can you kind of walk us through
Sure.
what happens next?
Sure. Um, I do want to say one thing is you are correct, Dr. Hill. In every call is answered. Okay, so
Wow. Okay.
everybody has to know that. So let's say I have 6 people on the phones, okay, or I
Uh-huh.
have 6 people manning a shift, and
Mm-hmm.
they're all busy. So what happens is calls will then go to a backup call center. So
Okay.
every 988 call is answered. So I just want to definitely get the
Wow.
listeners to understand that when you
Mhm.
call that, it will get answered.
Okay.
So what happens is I want to emphasize that 988 is not just a suicide hotline number, it's a crisis hotline number too. So we have people
Yes.
calling for random issues. You know,
Okay.
my neighbor just came over and was kind of saying some things that I'm kind of concerned about. And I really think that he or she or they need a resource. And so
Hmm.
here's kind of the situation. What resources can I give to them?
Okay.
Or
Okay.
we might have a person call and say, listen, I just lost my job. I'm not in a good place in my mind right now. I
Hmm.
just need to
Hmm.
talk with somebody. Okay.
Yes.
So it can be for a variety of things. But what we do is when somebody dials 988, let's say I'm going to call it instead of text or chat, but I call 988. Immediately, there's going to be an answering message that comes on, and it says that
Hmm.
it's a 988 crisis suicide hotline number. It's going to say, if you're a veteran, hit option one. And when you hit
Ah.
option one, that means that you are directly going to go to somebody that has worked with vets before
Okay.
or is a
Uh-huh.
veteran themselves. Okay.
Okay.
Which is really
Awesome.
important. The
Hmm.
second option it's going to say that if you're Spanish speaking, hit option two. And it says it in Spanish. Please don't ask me to
Yes.
say that because I don't
Es
quite got my Spanish.
español.
Yes. Yeah. So then you'd hit option two. And option three is if you're a part of the LGBTQ community and you want to talk to a gender affirming crisis counselor, you hit option three. Okay.
Okay.
So let's
Okay.
say none of those options are really fitting my situation or what I want to talk about or doesn't fit the community in which I identify in. So you just
Yes.
stay on the line and
Okay.
then a crisis counselor immediately comes on. And that amount of time is about 15 seconds. Okay,
Oh
that's our
my.
average answer of that's our average answer to answer a call. So
Wow.
the crisis counselor comes on and basically right at first is trying to build rapport and connection with the caller.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so we just try to first of all, it's 100% confidential. They're going to ask
Hmm.
you some questions about, maybe your name or what your address
Hmm.
is or whatever. If you don't want
Hmm.
to say that, then that's fine. You don't have to.
Okay. Hmm.
But at some point in the call, when it feels like a connection or there's rapport there, the crisis counselor is going to ask two questions. And this is to assess for safety because we want to make
Hmm.
sure that the caller is currently in a safe situation to
Hmm.
where they're not, at a point where they're going to be harming themselves or other people. Okay.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
basically, there's two prompting questions. If the caller answers no to both of those, then we really try to just continue to talk with the caller. We do what's called kind of a warm line conversation. We really try to
Hmm.
figure out what the crisis is, and what resources the person may need.
Hmm.
Okay. And we
Hmm.
listen.
Hmm.
Um, if the caller basically answers those two prompting questions where it does appear like there is a really big safety concern, okay, like
Hmm.
they do want to take their life or they have the means to, they're in
Hmm.
the process of actually just going through with that, then we go into a little bit longer. We ask a few more questions.
Hmm.
And if it truly is a situation where the caller has means, has intent, and is going to hurt themselves, then 1% of the time, 1%, okay, we
Hmm.
do have to have sometimes law enforcement get involved if it's imminent danger. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you have 100%, 98% of the calls that we get, we just talk to the person on the phone.
Yeah.
Okay. We get them resources and all that.
Hmm.
1% of the time, we may have to get law enforcement involved if the person says, okay, I'm in the process. Here's what I'm going to do.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
The other 1% of the time is we have an awesome option to dispatch a mobile crisis team to the
Oh.
location of the person. Okay. And so the person, there's two people that generally show up to mobile
Hmm.
crisis. A mobile
Hmm.
crisis response is what they call that.
Hmm.
And generally it's going to be a mental health professional, maybe a peer support. person, so somebody that has lived experience with mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so generally there's always two people that show up. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's just the other 1%. So 98% of the time we just talk on the phone. We just,
Mm-hmm.
provide resources, listen. And so that's what happens.
Okay. Thank you for taking me through that and for really explaining it's a crisis hotline. It's
Yes.
not just limited to suicide.
Yes, ma'am.
Suicide is definitely a crisis, but it's not limited. And the fact that you will call the police that 1% of the time if the client on the other end is really, really struggling and may cause harm to themselves, or send a crisis team to an
Yes.
individual is super, super exciting to me because many times it sounds like you all have the opportunity to talk them off the ledge, but you almost need to be in close proximity to really get them off that ledge, to grab an arm or a hand and say, come on, I'll help you. So that is, man, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That is really good.
And Dr. Hill, I don't have a solid statistic for this, but I would say probably about half the calls or
Mhm.
text, or even sometimes chats that 988 gets, many times it's other people on behalf of somebody else. So
I
it's
see.
it's the parent calling and saying, I don't know what to do,
Yes,
or
yes,
it's the neighbor calling and saying, hey, my neighbor's across the street and the behavior is just,
right.
I'm trying to figure out what to do because it doesn't seem like this person. Or
Mm-hmm.
so we do get a lot of those calls. And so if the person that is on the phone says, listen, I really think that this person that's in need would benefit if somebody actually comes out in person, then that's when we can initiate a mobile dispatch, or our call takers are also trained to offer that. If
Okay.
being over the phone isn't, is not going to de-escalate the crisis where they do need
Mm-hmm.
somebody in person, the call taker can
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, we do have a mobile dispatch team that we can dispatch now, and they
Mm-hmm.
will show up to the location within an hour. So generally, it's a lot sooner than that. I've heard of units showing up in 30 minutes. So it just kind of
Wow.
depends, if they're already on a call or whatever, but they have to show up within an hour.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
a,
it's uh it's very interesting to me that the crisis team is willing to go anywhere
mhm.
to help an individual. So like you can order pizza, but they don't go in certain neighborhoods. They just only go to certain areas, but the crisis team will go anywhere. That's
Mhm.
so encouraging.
Well,
Uh,
and they show up in a vehicle. Most of our dispatch teams, they have vehicles that they show up in. So if it's really necessary where there needs to be, maybe a person does need to be taken to the emergency room, or maybe a person
mhm,
does need to be transported to an urgent care
mhm,
place. So they have the means to transport them as well.
mhm. Oh man, this is good.
Yeah.
I thought I knew kind of what your organization did, but just hearing this tonight, I realized no, I had no idea all the other wonderful things that Calm Care provides to our communities across the country.
Now, just to clarify, Dr. Hill, really quick though, the mobile crisis teams are actually the mental health centers that do that. So we
Yes,
dispatch them. Yeah, I just want to make sure. So it would be
yes, good.
Rediscover, Beacon Health, all those mental health centers, the 9 that
Yes.
are kind of in the metro area. So it's their staff that shows up. We just do the dispatching.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I want to
Good.
give
Thank
credit
you.
where credit's due.
Yes, yes. And it's easy
Yeah,
for me to not do it right. So
no,
thank
you're
you for
good.
helping me.
You're
Thank you
good.
for helping a sister out. I
Sure,
appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Now, how do you feel we are doing as a nation when it comes to embracing mental health wellness?
So, I think we're doing better.
Uh-huh.
I think we have a ways to go a little bit. So I'm not going to get political, but I do think that states really need to consider their funding. I think
Uh-huh.
that's where, because in order to have more mental health professionals and in order
Mm-hmm.
to provide certain things, it takes funding, it takes money.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that we do have a ways to go with that
Yes.
because I just don't think, I think mental health could be funded a little better in some
Mm-hmm.
areas to provide even more resources to
Mm-hmm.
communities. In terms of a stigma, I think there still is some, but I think people are talking about it more. And I do
Mm-hmm.
think that there are more resources available.
Mm-hmm.
And, much to what I was speaking of when I was younger, if I would have had 988 or known about it, because now
Uh-huh.
you see it in bathrooms, which is awesome. I
Yes.
get excited, or you see it on a wall. I think I would have called it or I would have texted
Mm-hmm.
it because I see it and I know what it is. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
would have been an option for me. So
Yes.
I think I think we're getting there. I think we
Yes.
still got a ways to go, but I think we're
Mm-hmm.
getting there. And I think um, there's more resources out there, especially, when it comes to, like I said, the resources for veterans or the LGBTQ community or there's just all kinds of resources for groups where people
Yes.
feel welcomed. And I see
Mm-hmm.
more of that in the mental health in the 25 years I've been in it. And that's
Yes.
exciting. There still could be
Mm-hmm.
more, don't get me wrong, but I I see there is growth. So
Good. Good.
yeah,
And I am always very hopeful that there is growth. And I have uh, found myself in agreement with you again in terms of our state legislators making sure we have enough funding in this particular arena. Um, Often, when it comes to social service dollars, it appears to be they're limited. Um, but I would dare to say that there is no shortage of money. It's just allocating the funds
correct.
to the needed
Yeah.
uh, communities so that everybody can receive the help that they need. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, and with 988, this is kind of where I'm at with it too. I mean, we have secured funding for this year, but much like some resources that just it's a continued, they
yes,
have continued funding. Like it's like,
yes,
911 is an automatic, I think it's a tax, right?
right.
So
Uh-huh.
988, we just don't have every year. It's like, okay, here we are again, you know
Yes,
and so
yes,
it'd be nice to have like 100% certainty that this is funded every year, so
right,
because it
right.
is say we're saving lives. I tell people that all the time.
That's
988
right.
saving lives.
Yes, that's awesome. Okay, now why do you believe students today are so vulnerable when it comes to suicide?
Sure. I think for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's I think trauma that occurs within the family unit or outside
Uh-huh.
of the family unit, I think that attributes a lot to it. I think there's substance use
Yeah.
that's going on a lot among
Mm-hmm.
students. Sometimes it's known and sometimes it's unknown.
Yes.
So I think it's important to definitely be aware of those issues. Um, I think social media can be very positive, but I
Uh-huh.
think also there's some things there that are causing a lot of stress and tension
Mm-hmm.
on our
Mm-hmm.
students. And
Mm-hmm.
so I definitely think that can.
Be a factor. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, a few years ago, a teenager uh, was encouraged to kill themselves by another teenager, by a friend, one of their best friends, and said, "Why don't you just kill yourself?" And the individual did try to kill themselves and may have been successful. I don't know the end of that story, but I just remember it was just so bizarre because in the news it said it was the person's friend that
Hmm.
encouraged them to commit suicide. So, um,
Yeah.
one of the things that you were talking about earlier is counselors and
Hmm.
those who would kind of like speak life into these individuals that's ready to die or in the midst of a crisis. And it would just be so nice, so wonderful if more of our youth and their friends spoke life to each other. That
Yes.
instead of criticizing them and making them feel worthless and agreeing with the negativity,
Hmm.
and for instance, say I'm talking to you and I don't like this about me, I don't like that about me, and I don't even know why I'm alive, and then you interject and say something like, well, I like the way this is, and you're not at all what you say you are. In fact, you're just the opposite. You have a wonderful personality and people love you. And,
Hmm.
it would just be so good to know that there's more and more of that kind of conversation going on, even in social media. If
Right.
social media could be uh, a voice of encouragement. It would be so helpful. But from what I'm hearing, is it is not often a voice of encouragement, but just the opposite. Is that what you have seen? I think you have a teenager, one or two
Yeah.
teenagers.
I have two
Yeah.
teenage girls. Yeah. And
Yes.
so my husband and I, we kind of monitor kind of what social media avenues that they're in,
Uh-huh.
and encourage them not to be a part of others and
Yes.
part of some, and just, kind of have that open dialogue. Um, so yeah, I agree with you on just having words of encouragement and,
Mm-hmm.
instead of any shaming or anything like that.
Yes.
I think definitely
Yes.
encouragement. And I just want to say, we don't do the texting feature of 988, but there has been children that have texted and said, "Hey, I'm really concerned about my friend.
Yes.
Here's what he or she or they said the other day, and or said to me earlier, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Can you help me?" And that is
Mm-hmm.
a perfect bridge into learning how to help a friend or helping somebody. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that people may not realize and may have a preconceived notion is that if I ask somebody, "Are you thinking about taking your life?" that
Yes.
that is going to then plant an idea in their mind to go ahead and do it if they weren't. And I'm here to tell you
Oh,
that's not the case at all. That's not the case
okay.
at all.
Oh, good.
I mean,
Thank you for
we
saying that. Yes.
yes, yeah, we just
Mm-hmm.
need to, it's okay to come out and ask the question. If they start saying things that you're really concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of things, making the comments that you said of, I'm just not worthy. I don't have
Yes.
any reason. Those kinds of statements
Mm-hmm.
that are really concerning. To
Mm-hmm.
just come right out and ask the question is
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's okay to
That's
ask that.
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Feeback, this has been phenomenal. This has just been a rich conversation, and we're probably going to have you back again because
Sure.
I think there is such a need, and the word needs to get out about 988, the crisis line,
Yes.
and how other ways we can use care calm. That would be awesome just to hear other things that CareCom is doing for humanity. And
Hmm.
would you like to share email address for
Sure.
CareCom or the website in case somebody wanted to reach out to them?
Sure. So if you go to Comcare, it's
Hmm.
www.comcare, COMMCAR
Hmm.
.com. So
Okay,
there's two
perfect.
M's in it. You can,
Okay, perfect.
yes,
And then we can always call that 988 crisis
yes,
hotline
yeah.
anytime,
And
24/7,
anytime,
right?
anywhere. And And just know this. So let's say you lived in California and you moved here. So your area code's different. Right
Yes.
now, they're trying to work on a feature geolocation where wherever you're standing or wherever it's going to go, your call would be diverted to the closest call center. They're working on that feature, but they
Oh,
don't have it yet. So
yes.
if I have a California, for instance, area code, when I call 988, it's going to go to a call center in California. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just am going to have to be really clear that, hey, I moved, I'm to Kansas. I'm in the Kansas
Yes.
City area. And they'll transfer you to the nearest call center where you're located at, because those call takers are really well versed on the resources within your area. So
Area.
just be aware
Yes.
of that until they get that geolocation going. That it's really based off your area code and the location of that. But you just say where you're actually physically located, and they'll transfer you to the closest call center. So yes.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Okay. Okay.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, Dr. Feeback, for a
Yes.
wonderful session on this evening. And this is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Remember, you can always reach us at www.drevelynhill.net. Until next time, Shades in Justice. Bye. Hey, thanks for being at our show on tonight. This is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Another great evening to be alive. Hey, this is Positive Power Christian Radio. Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Hey, see you next time. You can meet me every Wednesday at 8:30 Central Standard Time or 9:30 Eastern Standard Time right here at Positive Power Christian Radio. See you next time. Bye.